Hello, good evening, good morning to those who are joining from US. Namaskar to all of you. Welcome to the fifth session of Stars Forum. This is the 11th conference we are organizing. I will run my PPT, and before we start with our today's presenters, I will tell you about the Stars Forum. Stars Forum, that is a skill training for advancement of rural society. It is a collaborative body for mutual support for those organizations which are engaged in vocational skills, entrepreneurship, and livelihood, especially for the needy population. So that is the mission of Stars Forum. It is a networking body. So we forge partnership, it's a net collaborations. We support innovations, use of technology, and we try to build the capacity of our affiliate members or our collaborative organizations. We try to nurture future leaders by supporting young professionals in these NGOs. So that is the main objectives of Stars Forum. In last year, during the pandemic, Stars Forum has taken up various activities. Like we had conducted webinars with experts on topics like new opportunities for rural development, then emerging opportunities in solar energy, opportunities in food processing, jackfruit processing, then new opportunities in freelancing using computers, then GIS-based water management. The figures you are seeing in the bracket, they are the number of participants registered and participated in all these webinars and workshops. Most importantly, to ensure the food security during the pandemic, we started promoting kitchen gardens. And we have trained a pool of 140 trainers in various organizations, and through them we have created more than 1,000 kitchen gardens during this pandemic period. So this is a brief of what we did in this last 6 months. This is a core committee of Stars Forum. Because of them, the Stars Forums are able to conduct all these activities. I am thankful to all my team members. In this 11th National Stars Forum Annual Conference, this is the 5th day, and initial 4 days we had a session on social businesses, different business models, a workshop on design thinking, use of new technology like blockchains for rural development, then how we can use data in our work of the rural development. Yesterday we had a case studies on rural transformation, and today we are here for the session on Fab Labs and Fab Cities, the emerging technologies and a great network of Fab Labs. This is a brief of what we had done in this. In this webinar, we got very good participation participation so far. On an average, we have more than 100 participants, and 193 organizations participated in this webinar, and they are from 110 locations in India, and there are 18 participants from other part of the world. Those who are joining Stars Forum for the first time, coming to the webinar, I request them to become affiliate member of Stars Forum. There is no fees. It's a collaborative body. Just drop us an email on our email ID, and you share your expertise with us, and we share what we know with you, and together we will try to help each other. So this is about Stars Forum. Today we have a speaker, Sherry Lassiter from Fab Foundation. To introduce Sherry, all of you know Vigyan Ashram is working in rural areas from last more than 30 years. And in the past, we had a small workshop. We were working with traditional tools, traditional fabrication tools. And in 2002, it got changed because we had a visitor from MIT in USA, Dr. Neil Greshenfield. And after him, the Sherry Lassiter visited Vigyan Ashram, and she bring first machine to Vigyan Ashram. Sherry is he's a president of STARS, the Fab Foundation. She's a CEO of Fab Foundation. She is heading the global network of Fab Labs, nurturing them, establishing new Fab Labs around the world. Today, there are more than 2,000 Fab Labs in 126 countries. And she is inspiring the Fab Labbers around the world and basically inspire them to make new things. So this is about Sherry Lassiter. I request her to basically share with us the wonderful journey of Fab Labs and how Fab Labs are making impact all over the globe. Over to you, Sherry.
Thank you, Yogesh, very much. Namaste, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States, where it is -5 degrees Celsius today, as opposed to where it's very warm, like maybe 28 degrees where you are. So I'm very envious. I wanted to thank Chaitanya and Dr. Kulkarni and Bhakti, as well as the executive committee of the STARS Forum. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such an honor and pleasure to be here with an organization that does such amazing work in the world. I'm going to talk today, I'm going to share my screen, if I may. Let's see. Give me just a moment. Here we are. I'm going to talk about building back better. So the building back better is a phrase that was coined by the UN several years ago, and it's about disaster response. And I thought that in light of the pandemic of COVID-19, that we should talk about how do we build our communities back better. How do we use making and manufacturing and learning to build more resilient communities? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Maybe. Let's see. There we go. So Fab Labs are digital fabrication facilities, right? So this is a small room or a laboratory of digital design tools, things like CAD programs, as well as small scale manufacturing tools, digital manufacturing tools, meaning computer controlled manufacturing tools. So things like 3D printers or laser cutters or CNC routers. and you take those tools and you combine them with electronics design and programming, and you can make almost anything that you can imagine in that environment. And so these laboratories, as Yogesh said, he was actually the very first. The Vigyan Ashram was the very first in the world, and we brought some digital fabrication machines to Vigyan Ashram, and since that time, since that proto Fab Lab, the network has now grown to more than 2,000 labs in 126 countries. And that's pretty extraordinary. Now, if you add to that, and I don't know if you've all heard of maker spaces or hacker spaces, but if you add Fab Labs and hacker spaces and innovation hubs and maker spaces to the map, you've got a global infrastructure of thousands and thousands of facilities that have these same tools and processes, these same digital fabrication sort of manufacturing tools. And that is a lot of power. There's a lot of potential in a network like that. You can do distributed education, you can do distributed manufacturing and distributed business, different kinds of business opportunities, and you can make tremendous social impact around the world. So, we've accidentally, serendipitously built this global infrastructure amongst all of us that now we can really leverage to build back better. Just talking about the origins a little bit of Fab Labs, Professor Gershenfeld and a few of his colleagues at MIT formed the Center for Bits and Atoms back in around 2001. And this was with a large grant from the National Science Foundation in the United States. And really, we were tasked with looking at the studying and exploring the boundary between the digital world and the physical world. So basically what we were trying to do is merge two sciences, merge physical science and computer science, and really understand how do you build a smart world in essence. Now, when we did that research, we built an amazing large facility, digital fabrication facility at MIT for research. It went all the way from like the nanoscale, you could look at things and make things at the nanoscale, all the way up to the building scale. And our students at MIT said, wow, we want to learn how to use this. We want to learn how to use these tools, and not just for our engineering projects, but we also want to learn how to use this for our personal fabrication, for personal reasons, for personal manufacturing in essence. And so we started this course called How to Make Almost Anything. And in the course of one semester, our students would learn all of these different design tools, manufacturing tools, electronics, and programming, and they would make a product in essence of their own design that proved their mastery of all these digital skills, digital literacies. And of course, students are extraordinarily imaginative, much more creative and imaginative than we could ever be. And they came up with the wildest things, anything from a web browser for parrots, which you might see here, right? Where a parrot can go visit another parrot online and keep them company, to this thing, which is a dress that protects your personal space. So it deploys spines to keep people like 2 feet away from one another. To making machines that do this kind of digital manufacturing. And this is what inspired, in essence, the Fab Labs, because the ability that this is a transformative learning experience, number one, and number two, it gave sort of entrepreneurial spirits the ability to make what they could imagine. And so this is kind of what inspired the network. And really, you can make almost anything. So on the left here, you see this was made by Fab Lab Barcelona. This is Tomas Diez, who you'll hear from shortly. They made a solar house using their Fab Lab. We've made communication devices, radios, we've made skateboards, complex circuits for communications, you name it, you could make just about anything. And that's really going to potentially change the politics of working and workplace over time. And so this is a very empowering set of tools. And if you don't have some of these tools, I would really suggest maybe you start to invest in them, because you'll find they'll be incredibly useful for the future. Now, you know, we talk about machines and we talk about business opportunity and entrepreneurship, but this is also about social impact. And if we don't want to, we have an opportunity now as we build back better, to not just use the technology to make a few people very rich, like we did during the development of computers and the first digital revolution, right? We made a few people very rich, and then everybody else was kind of left out of the economic picture. We don't want to do that this time. As these tools become ubiquitous, as they become embedded in everything that we do, we want to be sure that we do this in a sustainable way, in a way that improves everyone's lives and livelihoods. And so the social impact becomes very important. The whole network right now is working on the UN sustainability goals. So we're mapping the projects that we do and the work that we undertake to the UN sustainability goals, such that whatever we build better, and we build in a sustainable way, and in a way that will make good economic impact for everyone. So COVID-19, the pandemic hit, and the central supply chains completely failed, right? Nobody could get personal protective equipment, PPE, and everyone was desperate, because this is a horrible, very infectious disease. And what was so extraordinary was to see how Fab Labs and maker spaces and all of these sort of some of the universities and colleges and places like your organizations, right? That how they came together and they filled in the gap. They made PPE, they made hand sanitizer, they made shields, they made masks, they made all sorts of things to help healthcare workers and to help individuals fight this disease, or keep from getting this disease. And what we found that was really interesting is that we have always advertised ourselves, the Fab Labs and makerspaces, as being potentially a distributed manufacturing network, right? That we could really do this, but we've never had a chance to prove it, really. And this was the first time at a global scale that we were able to prove what we can do as a distributed organization, or as a distributed community, that we can fill the gaps. And the way that that the world self-organized was fascinating. So up here, this is Joggle, Just One Giant Lab, and this is a group of do-it-yourself biofabricators, in essence, or biology fabricators. And they came together around testing and around different interventions for COVID-19. Open source medical supply, that's what you see here. They vetted designs from all over the world for different kinds of PPE, and then kept track of would promote the ones that they felt were safe, and then they kept track of how many were made. This says 16,000. This is from like March or April, but now we're at like 42 million pieces of PPE that have been produced around the world by these self-organizing networks. In Europe, there were extraordinary there was an extraordinary effort to bring makers together to respond. And then here in India, there was an organization, I think Vigyan Ashram, you also, Yogesh, you guys also participated in this, but the Makers Asylum in Mumbai pulled together 42 different organizations. I'll move on here. 42 different organizations, maker spaces and Fab Labs from across India to respond. And they made, in 75 days, they made more than 1 million face shields. And they did it they also, in that same 75 days, probably iterated 28 different versions or of the product, of the shields, in order to come up with something that was sustainable, both in terms of materials, but also in terms of the sustainability of the organization making them. And these are beautiful quality products, as good as you would find in any manufacturing, situation, and they self-organized. This community self-organized, and in essence came to help relieve the pandemic, right? Throughout the Fab Lab network, we, through our Fab Academy, which is how to make almost anything, that class for the global network, we've repackaged it now. We have very sophisticated labs that host this program, and we did a manufacturing survey back in May and June, and just to find out what these different labs were doing in terms of the pandemic. And this is what we found, is that we had, from all of these different countries that you see in the map here, they were making PPE, and the sort of 5 things that we took away that kind of were across all labs is that most of the PPE they were making was for local organizations. So they were locally producing for local organizations. They were producing the PPE for free or for cost of materials only, which is not very sustainable. So that's a big lesson to learn for going forward. How do you do it sustainably? I think we could learn from the Makers Asylum effort. Also, the PPE was not approved by national certifying organizations because there just wasn't time. And so most of the PPE was approved by local hospitals and healthcare professionals. And most of the labs didn't use courier services. They delivered the PPE directly to the hospital or the nursing home or the organization that needed it. And most of the labs were basically providing PPE because the manufacturers couldn't do it. So those were really some interesting lessons about resilience, about local community resilience. And this is just quickly what some of the things that were made in the network. Mostly it was face shields, gowns, ventilators, and face masks, but they got into all sorts of things. They got into respirators, oximeters, even hospital beds, which I thought was really, really interesting. So it was very sophisticated what they were able to do. It wasn't just really simple stuff, So the pandemic, not only, was it a health hazard, the implications, economic implications of what is happening. We're still in the middle of this, especially in the United States, right? The World Bank estimated that 60 million people would be pushed into extreme poverty by the end of this year. And the United Nations talks about, the equivalent of 400 million jobs lost. Those are devastating numbers, and that really pushes people into a terrible, terrible place economically. And it really threatens their survival. So this is an economic model called the donut. It's called Donut Economics by a woman, Kate Rayworth. Really, really interesting look at economics, sort of resetting the way we do business, the way we look at economic opportunity. So the donut is this green circle, right? And the green circle is the sweet spot of where we need to be working, I think. Outside of that circle is the environment. And if you push too far in terms of working and consuming resources around the world, you're going to destroy the environment, which is the outside of the circle. And on the inside of the circle is really human poverty in a way, right? It's pushing, if you do things too cheaply and you do things in ways that just benefit a few people, right? You're going to force people into extreme poverty and into an unsustainable life. And so the place we need to be working is in this green circle where we can both sustain our environment and sustain and give people real economic opportunity. And so I feel like this is a really interesting way to think about economics going forward. Related to this, of course, is workforce and the rapid and disruptive, the rapid and disruptive development of technology. So we feel like we're in the fourth industrial revolution right now, which, the third industrial revolution was really about automation and manufacturing and computation. But now we're entering this era of cyber physical systems. So people will have to collaborate with robots and have to problem solve with robots in terms of manufacturing, in terms of things that they do. There's the Internet of Things, the way that everything is now going to be connected and networking. It's really the digital era, and it's really going to change and is changing the way we work and the places that we work and how we work. And we did a study, the Fab Foundation did a study with the National Governors Association here in the United States over the last 2 years about how these technologies are disrupting the workforce and workplace. And we identified, through research with experts around the world, that these were sort of the 5, driving technologies that are disrupting all of our lives, right? So automation, including robotics and self-driving vehicles, additive manufacturing and 3D printing, artificial intelligence and machine learning, Internet of Things, cloud-based technologies. And these are not verticals. It's not like one industry is going to be affected by automation. These are horizontal, so they go across all industries. And so the kinds of skills that you need to work in these environments is very specific and very different for what we're doing right now, for the kinds of the education that we certainly in the United States are doing, and I suspect probably there too. We're still educating for old-fashioned, manufacturing, at scale, right? And it's not digital manufacturing, and it doesn't have necessarily much beyond mechanical automation. And none of these digital skills really are included in that kind of an education. And we think it's going to be essential to be able to participate in the 21st century economy, no matter where you are. So I'm just going to briefly go through the .edu, the education, the business, and the sort of social impact of what the network is up to. So we'll start with education. Fab Academy. So Vigyan Ashram is actually one of our big participants in Fab Academy. But this is the How to Make Almost Anything class at MIT, now repackaged for the global network. We have about 75 or 80 Fab Labs that participate, and they have students in their labs that work with a mentor, a guru, a technical guru, and together they, over 20 weeks, come up with a project or a product that shows their mastery at the end of the course. And what we're finding is that the people that finish this course are either getting hired to run maker spaces or Fab Labs or university or college laboratories around the world. They start their own business, so they create a product during this class, and then that product goes to market through Indiegogo or Kickstarter to get the funding, becomes a business, or they're just getting hired by international companies that really need these skill sets. And so this is a very, very it's turning out to be a very interesting economic driver for students that study these kinds of skills, and we're very, very excited about it. And we're expanding this to other kinds of courses. We have Fab Academy now, which is a course aimed at the intersection of design, biofabrication, and digital fabrication, and it's aimed at innovating in the textile industry. So terrific course that has inspired so many people around the world. We're also doing work for younger children, K through 12. We have this project called Scopes, Scaling a Community of Practice for Educators in STEM using digital fabrication. It's a worldwide project. It's aimed at formal education or formal educators. And really what we're doing is we're providing free curriculum around these cross-disciplinary STEM skills like you got in Fab Academy, these digital literacies. And it's also building a community of practice, a real community of practice that can be supportive and critique one another. The individuals can critique one another across the world to bring this practice to younger students and into formal education. And related to this is just to show you how this plays out, in Kerala, in Cochin, the Kerala Startup Mission has also been working with Fab Academy and with Fab Labs for several years now. They have two standard Fab Labs and they went to Fab Academy, and it worked so well. Their mission, of course, is to encourage entrepreneurships and startups throughout the state. And they found that Fab Academy worked so well for them that they wanted to make this a part of all of engineering education. So they built 20 mini Fab Labs in engineering colleges across the state to see, if this would scale. That worked well enough that now they've built a super Fab Lab in Cochin. And the super Fab Lab is aimed at two things. One is, an incubator in essence for new entrepreneurial businesses. But the second is they want to design and manufacture digital fabrication machines to go in all of the engineering colleges across the state, all 150 engineering colleges, because they want those students, once they get to university, to already have the skills and the mindset to work in digital fabrication. So .com, let's talk a little bit about the business the business side of this. So we're finding, as I noted in Fab Academy, that entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial enterprises are emerging from the network. These are some global examples from if you know anything about 3D printing, Ultimaker and Formlabs are two amazing international manufacturers and designers of 3D printing machines. They both emerged from the Fab Lab network. From Barcelona, we have Smart Citizens. This is, I believe, a Tomas project, where it's a data sensing and a data collection device that citizens can use to explore and study the environment around them, and then aggregate the data that they collect such that we can now understand what's happening in a city, in a region, across a country in terms of maybe pollution or noise, or all sorts of different factors that you can do. And then, of course, sustainable agriculture, that also came out of Barcelona. And then in Mexico, we're finding that lots and lots of family micro enterprises are able to emerge. I think in Poblano, they've got more than 300 family micro enterprises incubating from their Fab Lab, which is extraordinary, and it's supporting a whole community of families in the area. Now, Vigyan Ashram has got all these amazing examples of terrific products and projects that are becoming businesses. So this is their aquaponics project, which I've seen and is amazing. And this is now a business. Yes, Yogesh, is this? Are you actually selling this now?
Yeah, it's a company now. It's a company.
That's right. It's a company. Truly extraordinary. This is Auto Farm. This is a Fab Academy project that's becoming a business by Suhas Labade, and very successful. Looking at all sorts of solar applications for agriculture at Vigyan Ashram. I've seen several. This is just one. This is another Fab Academy project, the bamboo engraver by Supriya, another recent Fab Academy star and graduate. And this is a business, I believe, as well, or she's getting started on this as a business. And this is another one that emerged from Vigyan Ashram, which is the egg incubator. And it's a terrific project. You can, buy different kinds of incubators, whether it's like 500 eggs or 5,000 eggs, but the business is selling 20 incubators a year over the last 3 years. And this is just this is an example of one community that bought a 1,000 egg incubator, right? And it's supplying chicks and eggs to at least 10 women, right? And they're earning like about $138 in 90 days in rural India, Maharashtra. And it's just a tremendous asset for a local community and a tremendous boost of economic opportunity. So .org, this is the social impact. I'm almost done here. The first is, and I'm not going to say much about this because Tomas is going to talk a lot about it, but this is one of the kinds of projects that the global network comes together around, and Fab City is one of them. So it's a 40-year challenge for cities and communities to come up with self-sustainable living and manufacturing processes, right? They're locally productive, but they're globally connected. And we have about, I think about, I don't know how many cities at this point, maybe 40 cities that have signed up. But it's really not just about cities. It's about all communities everywhere. We're learning as much from rural communities and places like Vigyan Ashram as we are from the researchers and work going on in cities. It's about a circular economy. It's about that outside of that donut and the inside of that donut, donut economy. So something that you'll hear a lot more about. We're also very excited about the resilience that COVID-19 proved. We found that we work with a lot of humanitarian aid organizations, anything from the Red Cross to Terre des Hommes to Nepal Communautaire, Field Ready, and we're finding that once upon a time you used to they used to sort of fly in and try to rescue and save the population when there was a disaster. But now they're realizing, especially after COVID, when all the centralized supply chains failed, that really the way to invest in in humanitarian aid is to invest in economic development. And they're all looking at Fab Labs now and makerspaces as a way to develop economic independence and resilience within a community over time. Very exciting development. And just a little bit about the Fab Foundation. We're involved in public-private partnerships around the world aimed at education and social impact. So we're working in policy with the government to establish Fab Labs in every congressional district for education and for economic opportunity. We're obviously involved in helping support the Fab City project, the UN sustainability goals. We build networks of labs and then educational programs around the world with organizations like SolidWorks and Dassault Systems, Chevron, GE, etc. And so that's the kind of work we do, and we love doing it. And I'd just like to remind you now that it's really not about just the machines and the technology, but it's really about this community of practice. It's about what we do together, to make a more sustainable world. And my call to action is, say, please join us at the Fab Lab Network. FabLabs.io is our platform. Align with the SDGs. Think about your projects and the work that you do, and see how they support the UN sustainability goals. Join the Fab City Global Initiative, which you'll hear about next, and let's work together towards sustainable community impact. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sherry. It's very amazing. There are a couple of questions, but I think we will take it after Tomas' presentation. We'll take it together as a discussion. So let me go to the next presenter in line with the Fab Lab. That is a Fab City. My friend Tomas. Tomas is basically, he's a co-founder of the Fab Lab Barcelona. He's also basically director of the Fab City Research Lab in Spain. And he's also heading the Fab City Global Initiative, the global moment of the Fab City. Since my college days, I'm impressed by the Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of self-sufficient community. Tomas, many of those who are on the call today, the participant, they also like inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's vision of self-sufficient villages, the prosperous villages. And but when I was looking at the self-sufficiency in the villages, it was not. I was always feeling how to make it in the modern time, in the basically in 21st century. And when I heard Thomas first time talking about Fab City and the Fab Labs, then I said, yes, this is the answer to decentralized production, self-sufficient communities, and that's the Fab City. So over to you, Thomas.
Thank you so much, Yogesh, and all the team from STARS for the invitation. It is also always an honor to share the stage with Sherry Lassiter, who has been a source of inspiration and based, fundamental support for everything in Fab Labs, but especially for me personally. And also a difficult challenge to make a presentation after her. So let me share my screen first to test that everything is okay. So I am broadcasting from Indonesia. In my case, is 9:10 p.m. I am in Bali. So I heard that there are some Indonesians in the audience. Apa kabar? But I have a quite interesting journey. I am from Venezuela originally, in South America, just at the north of Brazil, where I did study urban design. And then I moved to Spain, to Barcelona, around in 2006, around 14 years ago. And then, thanks to the pandemic and many other coincidences, I ended up in Bali, a place that I've been connected with for the last almost 10 years. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my reflection in relationship to the world of Fab Labs and the world of digital fabrication, as well as its connection with the world of design and urbanism, which is actually what is part of my journey. So if you look at how the world works today, somehow, it's based on principles of extraction, right? So we have been able to master techniques in order to extract resources from the planet, natural resources, to turn them into products through very advanced processes and technologies, and then to move them around the world using also advanced technologies, but also very cheap energy sources. The fundamental one that we use today is the oil, and actually I am from one of the countries that produce most oil around the world, and I will go back to that. So these principles of resources, I have been discovering that they are based on a around 500-year-old history. And it's basically when the European missions or expeditions found in the East and the West Indies more resources, more abundance of resources, new type of resources as well. And at the same time, opportunities to dominate these resources and create the principles of extraction that we have today. I can talk very well about colonization since I am a colonizer and colonized. My father is Spanish. I am from Venezuela, as I said. So one of the things I've also been discovering is that some of the foundations of capitalism are based in Indonesia. And there's an interesting story that involves the Dutch expeditions and the necessity to fund the expeditions to basically extract nutmeg and other spices, but especially nutmeg from Indonesia, from the Banda Islands, and then sell them in Europe. And in order to fund these expeditions, the first shareholder companies were created. So it was the principles of capitalism invented in the 17th century somehow. And around a resource like this one, which by the time was as important as the oil or the petrol is for the 20th century or still today. And basically, we can say also that now it's being replaced by data, which is the principles of extraction applied in the digital economy, as Sherry was explaining. No? So as I was telling you before, nutmeg in the 17th century was similar to what oil has been in the 20th century, being from a country that it has been based mainly in a monoculture around oil. I can say that it's a complete disaster to just trust to one single resource and one type of knowledge your future and your development. It's also, I think, important to recognize as well that the control of resources like oil, in the way that we have today, what we have done it today, it has allowed to have a fiction or a fictional sense that these are cheap resources. So right now we don't pay the real cost that oil has behind it and all the accumulated cost around it. We don't pay also anything related to the environmental cost of the usage of fossil fuels in the atmosphere, as well as don't pay the social consequences of the current model of production in which our gadgets are based. We're able to have super fast computers, very complex technologies embedded in our pockets, but they are based on basically the exploitation, as I said before, of natural resources, but also on the exploitation of people, right? Which start to create these type of landscapes over and over again. This could be anywhere in the world, but you can say that it's one of the rainforests here in Indonesia used for logging, or sometimes used to produce the palm oil to the Nutella that we love. At the same time, we're creating like a new geographies. This is a coastline in Venezuela, just a few months back, being polluted by the bad handling of oil. So these principles of extraction, and especially during the last 200 years of industrialization, has led us to this accelerated growth, I would say economic growth, but also in the growth of the amount of carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere. And that is directly connected with the fact that it increases the temperature. And I think that I don't need to explain this. I hope that there is no climate deniers in the room. But what is causing is that, and this is from Stuart Brand, what this is causing is that base layering diagram from Stuart Brand as a reference to illustrate that these changes in temperature and carbon dioxide are causing the disruption on cycles in the planet and in the climate that used to be more predictable, right? So this illustrates, things like the fashion changes very fast, infrastructure doesn't change that fast, nature changes very slowly. But what we are seeing with the effects of climate change is that nature is starting to change very fast. And in order to adapt to those changes of nature, we need to be more resilient and more capable, right? So at the same time, when there is like we start to see a convergence of crisis of the economic model that was invented around 300 years ago, of industrialization that has been around us around 200 years ago. And also, I think that we can talk about that is the crisis of the digital revolution, of the first digital revolutions in computation and communications by the emergence of mega corporations like Facebook, Amazon, or Google. We're seeing another type of, together with the climate crisis, we're seeing also the convergence of technologies at the same time. So we have many crises coming into place, but at the same time, we have a convergence of capabilities and a convergence of technologies. The most relevant ones and the more widespread ones is of course the computations and communications, meaning computers connected to the internet, but also other technologies that Sherry was mentioning, artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, or the blockchain are coming together to allow us to probably explore new forms of organizing the way in which we operate in the world, or maybe perpetuate the same principles of extraction that have been around for so many years. So I will try to go fast from now. There is a third digital revolution. I don't think I need to explain pretty much about digital fabrication. It was Sherry was explaining also about Fab Labs. Being a global network of laboratories has allowed us to basically enable a platform for learning and a platform for innovation, I think like without precedent in our recent history. I have been witnessing this from the first person, as been participating in enabling the Fab Academy project, developing projects by myself inside Fab Labs, but also setting up and running Fab Lab Barcelona since 2017. a Fab Lab that is located inside an all-industrial building in an all-industrial area. So this is quite interesting because it illustrates the escape of industries from cities, because it's cheaper to produce somewhere else and fly products to Amazon warehouses thanks to the cheap oil. And then also, I wanted to show you this is our industrial building. This used to be a metal factory. But we have also a campus located in the middle of a forest in a semi-rural area, right? It's in the middle of Barcelona, in the metropolitan area of Barcelona. It's called Parc de Collserola, and our site is called Valdaura. It's around 140 hectares surrounded by nature, which is a place that used to be a farm. So we don't produce goods and we don't produce food anymore inside cities because we have been able to externalize that capacity. So inside Fab Lab Barcelona, as I said, we have been running Fab Academy since year 0, basically, literally. A Smart Citizen, yes, is one of the projects that I started inside Fab Lab with other colleagues. It's now a startup also that emerged from our lab, and it's kind of a self-sustaining business, offering open tools for citizens to be producers of information in the city. But also it has been a source of inspiration for women and girls to work with digital technologies for artistic expression and to development of products and services around the fashion industry, to teams like Sherry was mentioning as well, the Aqua Pioneers team, also developing open source aquaponics systems, like projects like Aldo has been doing, developing open source drones for monitoring agriculture. The open source beehives, another project started by 3 of our students, John, Ferran, and Jonathan, and now became a company established in the United States in collaboration with Aaron and Tristan, to even designing and making an entire restaurant that you can download to a house, right? So these are some of the projects together with many others that we have done during these years, no? So, I mean, out of this, I'm interested on putting, hard questions around how digital fabrication is changing design, how with the use of blockchain, we can start to think about like a real viable open source infrastructure for distributed production that can be at the same time sustainable, right? So we have explored some of these principles in a project called Distributed Design. This project is trying to connect makers with designers, and it's trying to professionalize a little bit more the role of makers. And it's going a little bit beyond the role of the maker as a hobbyist in a way, or as a technologist, but start to engage the designers and makers with problems of the real world, right? So we have been trying to create platforms to document different type of projects that have emerged from the Fab Lab network, and start to understand how these projects can connect also with distributed infrastructures for production. This is another platform that we run from our lab, which is called MakeWorks. We inherited from the MakeWorks team in Scotland, and it's basically, as we have mapped Fab Labs around the world, MakeWorks can map manufacturing facilities and material resources around regions. So basically, if you prototype a product in a Fab Lab, you can have access to the means to make that production, let's say, a little bit more industrial, right? Without having to make it all the way in China. This allows to identify the existing capabilities for local production that in some cases is underutilized in cities. And this allows also to reactivate the local economies. Still, of course, if you measure everything in the financial economy, then these type of processes will never beat the prices of things made in China using so many cheap resources that are not really before are the principles of enabling a distributed production that is the interesting thing is like the internet was supposed to be a distributed non-hierarchical platform for peers to exchange information between them. What has been happening is that the internet has been sequestered by companies that have been able to accumulate computation power, and basically through this accumulation of computation power give them some competitive advantages, and then they are replicating again the same principles of extractive capitalism into the digital economy. But there is still, I still believe that it's a possibility to enable these distributed principles into production, and somehow still work with some of the remaining distributed principles in the digital age that can be applied into fabrication. And this is where the Fab City Global Initiative comes. It's trying to build a paradigm in which we don't understand production as a linear process. And we don't understand production as a colonial process in which you have to conquer a resource, take an advantage position on top of this resource, kill your competition, basically, and then create a self-perpetuating mechanism in order to continue extracting value in the form of a financial value in the form of finances around a resource in the planet, but actually understanding that thanks to the digital revolutions, and now with the introduction of the digital revolution in fabrication, we can start to imagine ways to produce that are not depending on these global supply chains, but actually depending on local infrastructure and a better connection with the bioregional capacity around cities and villages that would allow to really produce locally, take advantage of even the waste that is produced in these areas, which is basically one of the main, you can think about waste probably as one of the main resources right now, and then reinsert it into the production capabilities of a city or a region. We started, we launched publicly this project in 2014, but we have been working on it since 2010, more or less. This is a moment in which the mayor of Barcelona publicly committed for Barcelona to produce almost everything it consumes by 2054, so in 40 years since July 2014. This is a screenshot from about half an hour ago, so there are 33 years left out of those 40 years, and our work is basically to make that happen. But the way in which we want to make this happen is not only keeping the high level of the challenge, but actually one of the key activities that we're doing right now inside the Fab City Global Initiative is to unpack the big challenge into smaller pieces. These smaller pieces are based actually on existing experiences and existing programs that we're running inside the Fab Lab network. So when you look at the Fab City Full Stack, which is a project that is a part of a research piece inside Fab City that is evolving, you'll see that at the bottom is a distributed infrastructure. And we think about the Fab Labs and maker spaces and different innovation labs as part of that distributed infrastructure. But on top of that, you need people to learn differently how to use these technologies and how to incorporate new principles of design and new principles of innovation. We also believe that on top of that, you need to support, great projects that have great potential and being incubated and turned into businesses. But they also need strategies that help them to be deployed in any given context, at the urban area, in a community, in a village, and so on. And they need to have platforms in order to be able to access to a global resource of knowledge, or to share it with the rest of the world as well, which would be the cities networks. So the cities networks today is actually growing. It's 38 cities. I had to update this one because we had 4 new cities join it during the Fab City Summit that we organized this summer. Some of these cities are Paris. Some examples are Paris building a big facility that will handle waste as a resource, especially waste coming from events organized in the city. They talk about how trash comes into this facility and can be turned into products. This is in Saint-Denis. These are some of the principles. Understanding that this is not, the Fab Lab plays a role, a central role, but this is thinking about complementary infrastructure and complementary knowledge that can help Fab Labs to really enhance and expand their capacity to produce impact in the city. This is in Seoul, where there is a plan to create some smart factories and flexible factories, but it's also a very interesting ongoing project in the Seoul Innovation Park, where there is a Fab Lab combined with other principles of social innovation. I'm going to be a bit faster. And this is actually something that you can visit in Seoul. The Fab City Puebla, this is something that already Sherry mentioned, and the work of Aristarco and the team that are doing in Mexico and the city of Puebla, and connecting artisans with digital fabrication as a way to recover an entire area of the city, in the center of the city. Or the Fab Lab example of a Fab City in Sao Paulo, where the city council invested heavily in developing 12 public Fab Labs as a part of a regional strategy to bring innovation to the most impoverished areas. So the funny thing is that when we launched Fab City for the first time in Barcelona, we said like, well, a Fab City should have maybe Fab Labs, but it should not be only a city full of Fab Labs, right? We started to understand that in order to test the Fab City principles, you need to start working in an ecosystemic way, in a smaller scale that is not only the city, but also the neighborhoods, and start to identify other players that, let's say, operate with some regenerative, circular, and sustainable principles in your area. And then out of that, create a prototype or an area, a testbed area in which some Fab City principles can be understood. But we also develop a larger analysis to understand which are all the initiatives that in the city of Barcelona are participating in things related with digital fabrication. And we were super surprised because it's a combination between public and private initiatives. And then one of the things that is more challenging, and still like it's most of the times that happen, is that a lot of them, they don't talk between each other. So one of the challenges that we have is to make these initiatives to talk between each other and to add, let's say, efforts instead of competing between them. So I wanted to zoom out a bit. This is the, Barcelona, or zoom in a little bit, and then end up with something like, I wanted to end up very quickly with some deeper reflection. So back in the 68, Stuart Brand and some other colleagues, mainly from the West Coast, launched the Whole Earth Catalog, where it's a magazine where a lot of solutions for sustainable farming, energy production with solar panels, some DIY hacks in order to bring a more sustainable life were shared in a form of a printed magazine everywhere. That's far before Fab Labs and some, a couple decades before the widespread of the internet. The next decade, in the 70s, a very well-renowned designer and professor at MIT, Victor Papanek, published Design for the Real World. And I always remember the first part of his book, where he says, like, one of the most dangerous professions in the world is the industrial designer, which is trying to create products that we don't need using unsustainable materials. And then that they partner with advertising energies to create that fake needs to keep us consuming for the only economic benefit of growing corporations. So we have been for so many time so clear about the ideas that we need to have, and then the big challenge that we're having now is how to make them a reality. So we're iterating, in some way, a collective knowledge, and I think that goes to your words about Mahatma Gandhi, Yogesh, which is finally making that convergence of the exact moment and the exact tools and the exact will of power of many people working together that can make actually that change happen. So I believe that making a little bit of an evolution of those principles of designing for the real world, I think that Victor Papanek didn't anticipate the power of the digital technologies. And I think that with the power we have now, we can think about that, these silos in which design used to be separated, now they're more permeable, and production, distribution, and consumption. There are things that start to become more together in a way, or will be more difficult to separate. And then, as a final reflection, I think that beyond all of this, I think it's not only important to master a technique or to achieve a logical knowledge around why to make things, and to demonstrate your technical capabilities, But I think that there is something that we need to record is the sense of making meaning out of what we make in a way, right? And I don't mean like just making meaning from the Western philosophy point of view. I think that we need to create more and more spaces in which we can learn from diversity. I can explain from my own experience in Bali. I'm trying to create that space here in which, in a way, I try to decolonize myself, try to connect with the local knowledge and the local wisdom, connect with the potential of the digital technologies that I strongly believe in order to avoid new forms of alienation now in the name of digital fabrication. So together with colleagues of mine here and from Jakarta, we are launching the Meaningful Design Group quite soon, which is proposing to be something between an innovation lab and a school that is going to be happening in Bali. Yogesh, I think that my time is mostly up, but I wanted to share with you that if you want to know more, you can look online at the Fab City book, or you go to our platforms, you will find a lot of more resources about the Fab City Global Initiative, as well as some of our educational programs. And I can share with you also my presentation if you're interested. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. It was great. I have a couple of questions. In fact, I personally have few questions, but there are many questions they put up in the QA box by the participant. We'll go by it. First, Sherry, for you, what step would I need to take if I would like to start a Fab Lab in my village, and whether what are the capital requirements, and will there be some handholding? So they want some guidance. So would you like to answer? Yeah.
Sure. So you can start modestly by getting 1 or 2 machines, like a 3D printer or a CNC router or a milling machine, or you can invest in a whole Fab Lab, which is right now probably costs on a US about $100,000, $125,000. So it's not affordable necessarily for an individual, but it might be affordable for, say, a small organization or a business. We have online, if you go to the fabfoundation.org website, we have a whole section on how you start a Fab Lab, including the inventory of equipment that we recommend that you start with or that you use, and the materials, different kinds of materials. And of course, there's always Vigyan Ashram or Makers Asylum or one of the local Fab Labs or maker spaces that can also support you. And actually, that's usually the way that you get supported. The Fab Foundation obviously doesn't fund these. The funding usually comes from a local foundation or a local investor or a local community. But there are extensive instructions on how you might start a Fab Lab and what you need to think about, right? The champions and or how do you make yourself sustainable, et cetera, et cetera. I would say that the biggest challenge is the long-term sustainability of a lab. So when you do this, you really need to have kind of a business plan in mind for how you do bring in resources and income. But as I said, Makers Asylum, Vigyan Ashram, there are a lot of spaces out there now that have done this and know how and can really help you understand what that pathway is. So would love to see you do it, please.
Yes, there are more than 45 Fab Labs in India now, and we have a small network. We are very well connected. So if you connect with any of us in the Indian Fab Lab, we will able to connect you with the nearest Fab Lab, and I'm sure they will help you out. So please, those participants want to start a Fab Lab, they can write to us. Even they can write to Stars Forum, and Stars Forum can connect you to the Fab India network of Fab Labs, the nearest Fab Lab in your town. So that will do. Yeah. Shiri, would you like to say something about to reduce the cost of the machines in the Fab Lab? You are working on the the machines making machines and Fab Labs making Fab Labs. Would you like to say something about that?
Sure. One of the things that the Fab Academy does is it disseminates research out of MIT. And one of the big research projects that we've been working on for many years now is machines that make machines. So we use a Fab Lab to make the machines in a Fab Lab. It's kind of a self-reproducing process, but it's a tenth of the price. So if you had to buy a Fab Lab right now for say $100,000, you could probably make the machines in a Fab Lab for $10,000. And so I think that's one of the big interests right now across the global network is how do you reproduce a Fab Lab for much less money, making it more accessible to more people. But also making machines in a Fab Lab can become a business in and of itself, right? So one of the very interesting things, if you think about it, as an entrepreneur or a designer, you come up with a design, a theoretical design, and then you prototype it. And then you have to go out and you find funding, and say you find funding, then you have to go back and redesign your product, as it were, to match the kinds of machines that are out on the market right now, right? And so, in the end, the product is not exactly as you designed it usually. And I won't say all the time, but usually. And so what this Machines That Make Machines does is it allows you to design your own manufacturing machines, in essence. So now the machines don't dictate what the designer and entrepreneur has to do. The entrepreneur can now dictate what the machine does and what the product will look like. And so it's a very, very exciting project. It has grown worldwide. There are lots of little businesses that are incubating out of the Machines That Make project. Is that what you meant, Yogesh?
Yes, yeah, because the bamboo engraver, which you showed in the basically in your presentation, which is made in Vigyan Ashram Fab Lab, to engrave on the bamboo for the local artisan. So that's the example of Fab Lab, and the cost can drastically comes down. So thank you, Sherry. Another question is more of I think it's a comment. It says like the Fab Labs are great, but whether they are biased over technology, and are you taking initiative to develop basically the leadership education or to make it more people centric? So that's the questions, like how the Fab Lab can become people centric. That's the comment. So would you like to respond?
I can add to that.
Yeah.
I think I would say something that probably Sherry would share, and it's like the first thing is like Fab Labs are made out of people, not out of machines, right? Which I think that makes this a big difference. It's a community of people. But I would like also to twist the question. I think that it's wrong to be only human-centered and only people-centered. I think that basically the anthropocentric views of the world is what is leading us here. Just being focused on human development and in the form of the way in which humans understand that development works in GDP and the extraction of resources is, I think, it's something that we must change. We need to try to promote from Fab Labs, it's something that I would agree that sometimes can be identified only with technology. But if we want to put Fab Labs to look at something else, I would say that it's not just other humans, but look at all the living systems in the planet. So it's more like a multi-species kind of approach in which Fab Labs can engage. And I have to say that now from the Fab City Global Initiative, we're trying to promote this idea with programs that we are designing. We're in the COOPs, but also linking the idea of Fab Labs and in Fab Cities, not only in connection with the city as a self-contained, let's say, object, but also a city as part of larger systems. And this, I found like a very interesting approach, which is approach to bioregions or bioregional development, which really fits very well into understanding that the way we live in cities is not just about humans, it's all about all the living systems that make possible for us to consume what we consume, to breathe the air that we breathe, and also to have clean water and basically to be sustained and be able to think about the future, because otherwise it's not going to be much time left if we keep consuming as we're doing and keep only thinking about humans.
Right. Yeah, I also want to add from my experience of Fab Academy. So especially like in a like a small village like Pabal, we are getting the same quality of education what the Fab Lab in Boston are getting. So it's like a quality education we are able to uh, provide in any corner. So the same quality of education of the Fab Academy in the remote village and in all over the globe. So basically, like technology, basically we are taking the help of the technology basically to uh, bring the people together, like distributed manufacturing, sharing the files, learning from others. Many of the projects what we did at Vigyan Ashram, I can tell you by name basically, like for this machine I got inspired by this Fab Lab and this Fab Academy project, and then I'm able to use it in my work. So this network basically is of the people, with the creative people, and then you can learn from each other. So in fact the purpose of this for inviting these people and for you together is we want this network to grow. So I think it's for the people. Yeah. So thank you, Sherry. Another question, the next question is for, I think it's for Thomas. What would be the important building blocks of the new supply chain if centralized manufacturing is to be replaced with distributed manufacturing, and how long it will take? So that's the question.
Yeah, well, I'm not a futuristic, like I cannot read the future, so I don't know how long it would take. But I think it can take you know, quite a shorter time that we might imagine. No, we assume that certain things are irreplaceable, or that we give them for granted and they're part of our life forever. So to give you an idea, oil was only discovered at the end of the 19th century. So we have been around oil around for about 100 years, which is nothing in relationship to the entire lifespan of humanity. Imagine that we invented agriculture 14,000 years ago, right? So I believe that the way in which we're going to transform the way we produce things and the way we consume them is not going to be a revolution in the sense that one needs to prevail over the other. I think that it's mostly like a calibration of the current, or keeping the good things about industrialization, calibrate them, and then bring back to local production what makes sense to produce locally with local materials, with local resources. What doesn't make sense is to buy things, make them fly thousands of kilometers, and then consume them in a place where you can basically have buy something made out of plastic that flies around the world to make it to your place. It doesn't make sense because you're surrounded by plastic waste. So it's like one of these really kind of a nonsensical ways, things that we sensical principles that we're still applying the way we produce and consume. Another example is shrimps in the UK are cultivated in the UK, and then they are shipped to Thailand in order to take the peel off, and then they are, because the labor is very cheap, and then they are sent back for consumption in the UK. So it's so cheap to fly things, and we need to keep consume streams that are peeled off, that we're able to just fly them around the world, right? So first of all, removing the nonsensical is the first step, and there are a lot of things around that you cannot. Is a lot around that. The second thing I believe is that the role of Fab Labs and is important because they are already like Trojan horses inside cities and inside communities. And the more they become influential with local decision makers, as well as local industrial capacity with local businesses, we can start to accelerate this transition. And I believe that that's where really the power comes. It's not just like inventing a model and then implement it, but it's actually built up from an existing community and trying to produce that change that they can be scaled globally. So we say 40 years until 2054. I hope that we do it before. Maybe we don't have much time, so the next 10 years are going to be crucial to really start this transition.
Right. Because many times when I look towards the Indian cities, they are basically huge and it's a big mess. And so when I think about the Fab City for the city like Mumbai or Pune, it become big question mark in front of me. So what is the viable size of the population to make it a self-sufficient? Have you done any study for that?
Well, I believe that one of the things that I've been thinking about very deeply recently is that self-sufficiency is kind of an utopia, and in some kinds it's kind of a contradiction, right? Because the cities are highly dependent on other systems, right? And the planet is a sum of systems. So you really that self-sufficiency is kind of almost again, I don't know if it's self-sufficient cities is an oxymoron itself, no? But the idea of the size, I think, is quite interesting, and it's something that we don't have an answer to that. But I would tell you an approach that I feel is interesting in big cities, and it's something that we try in Barcelona, because sometimes when you talk about city, you think okay, the city is manageable, no? It's kind of an object that you can shape and you can make some decisions and things are going to change magically. But the truth is that cities are very complex, and it's very hard to transform things at the city scale. What we found out in Barcelona is that it was interesting to work at the neighborhood scale. So you want to work where there are consolidated communities or limited or political limits that are smaller. And we have found, and again, this is not a fact, it's not a scientific fact, but we have found that around between 50,000 and 100,000 people is a relatively manageable size to start to produce a smaller scale interventions that they can be added up. So instead of working on Mumbai as a whole, you can think about working in a smaller units and smaller cells that they add to themselves and create this incremental change.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. In fact, I just want to add on basically, again, inspired by this Fab City, because I thought this is very big and I can't do it. I started look for, can I make my Vigyan Ashram campus a Fab campus, the self-sufficient campus. Self-sufficient in terms of energy, in terms of water, in terms of agriculture, food, in terms of waste management. And then we set up goal for own our small community or our campus or our village. So I think that's what Thomas want to basically convey. Like we can start small, and then of course the big blogs will get automatically happen. There are participants from Kamalistan, so they want to get connected with you, Thomas. So will you be there in Indonesia for long, or you basically transit to Indonesia now?
Well, I mean, I'm transitioning for Indonesian to be home.
Okay.
Yeah. So
okay. Good. So you are really becoming South Asian now.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
It makes sense. I started from Venezuela. I went to Barcelona, and now I'm going. And I'm happy to be back in the tropics.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. See. So there is different comments are there, whether this concept is similar to Dr. Yunus of Bangladesh. Have you know about it?
Not familiar. And there was another question about the work of the Compression Institute. I was not aware of that, but please share more of these projects that you believe are connected to what we're doing, and we'll be happy to research on those and connect with them.
Okay. So please share us the more details so I can pass it on to Thomas and yeah. Then whether can we build a consumer index for each of the citizens and track how much individuals add to a carbon footprint? So have you done something like this?
Well,
this calculator?
Not really. I know that the United States has it, and some of the discussions we had with Neil and his brothers when they were doing their book last. I don't know if you remember, but they were working on understanding the consumer index of the US in order to understand which areas we could think about that Fab Labs or the new way of production can create an impact on the way people consume. But this is an interesting question because it links with also some other discussions that we are having around a project that we are developing now for the bioregion of Barcelona. We are applying for a big fund from the European Union in the Green New Deal calls. And with my friend Indy Johar, which by the way has Indian roots as well, he leads the Dark Matter Labs in the UK. He keeps bringing this question, like we are talking all the time about changing the way we produce, but it's as important to talk about the way we produce to talk about the way we consume. And I think that that's super important. And it's a cultural transformation as well. Just the fact that we consume as much is also part of the problem.
Okay.
At the Media Lab at MIT, we started a project a couple of years ago where all of us had to keep track of and report our flights around the country and overseas so that we could actually look at our carbon footprint. And people like myself and Neil Gershenfeld have horrible carbon footprints. And the idea was to encourage us to do more of this, right? To do more zooming and less consumption of the resources of the world, but also to figure out how we can offset our carbon footprint, right? And so there are ways that you can look individually at what you do to make a difference, to realize and understand, and then make a difference in your own behavior, which I think are going to be very important in that regard as well.
So there are a couple of comments and suggestions they want to suggest you and link with you. But what I will do, I will collect this information and pass it on to you. And basically, maybe this initiative can become a Fab City initiative, like some sanitation, some people are working. So let's basically try to connect the dots and make it a impactful, like sustainable cities and the sustainable communities. So we are coming to basically our end of the session, our time. It was great talking to you, Sherry and Thomas. I'm sure like the participant of the Stars Forum conference, they heard about Fab Lab. Some of them visited Vigyan Ashram, and I was like always keeping on talking about the Fab Labs and how it helps us to transform our operation from traditional makerspace to the new, basically with the new technologies. So I'm sure basically like the Stars Forum members will able to join us for this digital like the revolution which is now already happening. We are a part of it. We are already experiencing. Industries are already started using these machines and technologies, but now basically the rural community, those who basically missed out in the previous industrial revolution, I think we can't afford now to miss out now. We need, and that's why the Stars Forum want to bring Sherry, Lassiter and Tomas here, so that we can take the help of their expertise, their guidance, and then we can maybe have more Fab Labs and more this kind of sustainable communities in our country. So thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Thomas, for joining us on the Stars Forum. Since today is the last day of our conference, I want to thank all the participants. In fact, there are more than 400 plus registrations. The people registered for the conference from 110 different locations and 18 locations across the globe, and they are participating. So it was wonderful. Of course, though it's a carbon, basically it saves the carbon footprint, but next year we want to see everyone in person, because every year for 2 days in a year we meet in person, we discuss all topics, all issues close to the members. And I hope basically we will soon able to invite Thomas and Sherry to basically to India to hear basically to meet the people. So thank you all. Thank you for joining on the Stars Forum. The next programs of the Stars Forum we will announce on our email list. We will announce it on our Facebook page and the WhatsApp groups. You will came to know about the next training program. on kitchen garden will be in Hindi. Then we have a couple of webinars scheduled up. We will pass on the information to you. If you are not an affiliate member, please send us an email. We will add to our group. So again, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Thomas. Namaskar. Thank you.